following the great ones. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna mentions that an extraordinary manifestation of God is embodied in every age. Though unborn and changeless, I come into being through my own Maya. This immense spiritual power manifests through an incarnation for the spiritual uplift of humanity. And when these great souls come, they bring with them divine companions to help them in their mission and work. Sri Ramakrishna gives an example comparing an incarnation to a great chandelier, and his disciples like many lamps or bulbs in that chandelier, all with different shapes and sizes, but the same light coming from the same source, shining through all the lamps. Now there are other great souls who, through their own efforts and through God's grace, have become established in God consciousness. Such a person lives exclusively in God. Following the great ones such as Lord Buddha, Jesus, Ramakrishna, their disciples, and other spiritual masters seems to be rather effortless on the face of it. But emulating them has some very serious implications. When we consider some of the teachers in our Vedantic tradition, especially Sri Sarada Devi, the Holy Mother, following her seems easy. She's so natural and loving, compassionate, undemanding, forgiving, non-judgmental, all the things that we long for in a spiritual teacher. And there is an ease and grace with which she deals with all kinds of people. All of this is true. But Mother's life, as well as the life of other great souls, conveys a profound message for serious seekers of truth. The Katha Upanishad warns, the way is sharp as the edge of a razor and difficult to cross, so say the wise. This subject is not one to be taken lightly. It's not easy to follow the spiritual masters. But in spite of this, we have to utishtata, jagrata, prapya, varan, nibodhata, arise, awake, approach the excellent teachers and learn so that we can realize our true self. What do we mean when we imply that we should follow someone else? We sort of bristle at this idea. We've all heard that we're the Atman, and further, we know that we need a spiritual teacher. With a little instruction here and there, can't we basically go it alone? I mean, after all, the great Vedic mantras declare, "Thou art that, I am Brahman." We're all intelligent, self-directed, free-thinking individuals. And furthermore, there's copious literature available, including many instructions for techniques of meditation right at our fingertips with the click of a mouse. Of course, herein lies the trap. It's laudable to be self-sufficient, independent, and indeed our spiritual teachers encourage us to stand on our own feet. But unfortunately, when we are spiritually immature, we simply can't do it on our own, no matter if we are that or not. Our egocentricity has a way of shunting us into an endless maze of ifs, ands, ors, and buts. The way is straight and narrow, but the way of the ego is never straight. If we're really intelligent, we will be alert and wary, considering our choices, and equally reluctant to depend on the direction that we're likely to take on our own. Experience and the deviousness of the mind, which sort of like a clever press agent, which writes hundreds of cover stories for us, but really has very little to do with the truth, should be enough to convince us that we're very likely, if left to ourselves, to take a wrong exit, walk in an opposite direction of where we should be going, or getting completely lost along the way. We're all yearning for lasting peace and security and fulfillment and happiness. We fervently wish for all the things that are not available here. That's why we're searching. The eternal search goes on and on. Now, deep down, we know there just has to be something else, something better, something permanent. But in our present condition, everything is mixed up. Our intentions, our resolves, our desires, our attachments, it's a big bundle, and it's very hard to untangle it. We need a way out of this mess, which we've created for ourselves. Our time here is short. It's not only short, but it's unpredictable. We never know what's going to happen next. Our life is precious. So a sincere seeker does not want to waste any time taking avoidable detours. Well, I'd like to suggest, if we're earnest about transforming our consciousness, moving forward in our spiritual life now, that we should maintain our independence, but with a spirit of humility, follow someone whom we respect and admire, someone whose life represents to us an ideal we wish to emulate and to make our own, no matter how exacting or difficult it proves to be, because it's going to yield the pearl of great price. Swami Vivekananda says that religion is neither talk, nor theory, nor intellectual consent. It is realization in the heart of our hearts. It is touching God. It is feeling, it is realizing that I am the Spirit, at one with the universal Spirit in all its great manifestations. In the course of a lecture on Christ the Messenger that Swami Vivekananda gave while he was in Southern California, he said, "The vibration of light is everywhere. It's omnipresent. But we have to strike the light of the lamp before we can see that light. The omnipresent God of the universe cannot be seen until he is reflected by these giant lamps of the earth, the prophets, the man-gods, the incarnations, the embodiments of God." Now, as he mentions, we may talk of principles and expound theories, but every thought and action of ours indicate that we can only understand the principle when it comes to us through a person. We cannot really form an idea of something which we have never experienced. Talking, he said, is not actuality. And we can add to that, thinking is not actuality either. The existence of God, Sat Chit Ananda, the Atman, our true self, cannot be conceived, experienced, or proved through discursive reasoning. These metaphysical truths and existential questions cannot be addressed through ratiocination. It's not a matter of intellectual analysis. In the subtle, fine world of the spirit, ordinary speech and mind turn back, the Upanishads say. So we can only attempt to grasp these profound truths, enter into the heart of them when they come to us or demonstrated by an ideal person. The precept is understood only through example. Swami Vivekananda discusses this especially in 3 lectures: The Great Teachers of the World, My Master, which is a lecture on Sri Ramakrishna, and Christ the Messenger. One of his main points in all 3 of these talks is that we cannot possibly form a higher ideal of God than what is actually embodied in these great souls, what they have realized and set before us as an example. We can't even conceive of it other than this. Now, this is illustrated in the book, The Following of Christ, being the spiritual diary of the Netherlander Gerard Groot, recorded in the 14th century. Groot's a very interesting person. He was not only widely educated with a brilliant original mind, but he also had deep insight into the intricacies of practical spiritual life. He was a contemporary with the Flemish mystic Rysbroek, whom he frequently visited in his monastery in Brussels, and he would discuss with him the mysteries of the inner life. Recognizing his spiritual genius, Rysbroek suggested to Groot that he retire from the active life and enter into a Carthusian monastery, which he did. And he lived there for quite some years until he was advised by the senior of this order that he should actually remain as a lay person, where the prior felt he could reach and therefore benefit more people. Now, it's at this time that Groot founded his brotherhood, the secular clergy called the Brethren and Sisters of the Common Life. And during these years, he kept a diary while he was in the monastery and afterwards, which contained the teachings of what is called Devotio Moderna, the modern or new devotion. And those who followed the new devotion were not interested in theory or dogma or theology handed down by the church, but in developing an intimate relationship with God and experiencing God, touching God, as Swamiji would say. Now, the teachings of the new devotion were published under the title The Following of Christ. And later in the 15th century, Thomas à Kempis edited, copied, and translated The Following of Christ from Dutch into Latin. He was a great admirer of Groot and wrote his biography. According to many, besides the Bible, this is the most widely read and beloved book throughout Christendom. The Following of Christ later became widely known as The Imitation of Christ. It was translated first into English in the latter part of the 15th century and has been attributed to Thomas à Kempis. This attribution, however, remains a contentious debate even today among religious scholars, especially among the Jesuits. But for our purpose this evening, the authorship of the work is not our concern. It is the beautiful yet practical sentiment that it contains that we want to consider. How the principle is understood through example. And this evening I will use The Following of Christ and The Imitation of Christ, the titles, interchangeably. The Following of Christ consists of 3 books. Groot wrote it into 3 books with multiple chapters, and when Thomas à Kempis translated it, he translated it into 4 books with multiple chapters. So the first 2 books of Groot's, the second book, Thomas à Kempis made it into the second and third book in The Imitation of Christ. The first 2 books of The Following are useful reminders for spiritual life and suggestions for drawing one into the inner life. Now this evening I particularly want to focus on the first chapter of Book 1 entitled The Following of Christ and Turning Away from Worldly Vanities, for 2 reasons. 1, because Christ's example is a paradigm for us, which can be universally applied to any great spiritual master. And the second has to do with Swami Vivekananda, which I'll get to in a minute. Jesus has proclaimed, "I am the light of the world, the truth, the life, the way, the door." Now, these could be the words of any great spiritual master. In fact, any incarnation's name could be substituted for Jesus. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna proclaims, "This divine Maya of mine, consisting of the gunas, is hard to overcome. But those who take refuge in me alone shall cross over this Maya. By that devotion he knows me, knows what in truth I am and who I am. Then, having known me in truth, he forthwith enters into me." When Krishna says me, he is identifying himself with unlimited cosmic consciousness, the absolute reality. The same holds true for all great knowers of God. They are completely free of any limited identity. Their consciousness is expanded into the infinite. So their name merely indicates an impersonal state of being. As Swamiji says, they are a mass of light. In the hymn Kandana that Swami Vivekananda wrote on Sri Ramakrishna, he said that his physical body was pure consciousness condensed, Chid Ghanakaya. Even his body was pure consciousness. Although Sri Ramakrishna never used the first personal pronoun, he told Swamiji obliquely, "He who is Rama and he who was Krishna is now Ramakrishna, but not in your Vedantic sense." Again, he told his disciples, and through them us, "If you practice even 1/16 of what I have practiced, you will surely reach the goal. In other words, do as I have done, follow my example." Lord Buddha told his disciples, "Be ye lamps unto yourselves. Be your own confidence. Hold to the truth within yourself as to the only lamp." That is exactly what Lord Buddha himself did. He said about himself, "Buddha is the name of infinite knowledge, infinite as the sky. I, Gautama, have reached that state. You all will reach that state too if you struggle for it." Sri Ramakrishna, in his homely way, says that an incarnation is like a hole in a screen. From the finite side, we can peep through that hole into the infinite. "Anyone who follows me walks not in darkness, for that person will have the light of life." These words of Christ remind us that we must follow him, imitate his life and ways, if we are to be truly enlightened and thereby liberated from the darkness of our own hearts. Groot tells us that the most important thing we can possibly do is to reflect on the life of Jesus. And by extension, we may say, reflect on the life of any great one. Anyone who wishes to understand Christ's words, or the words of any great soul, to imbibe their spirit and essence, should strive to become like that person in every way. Now, there is a special connection between Christ and the Ramakrishna Vivekananda Vedanta and the Ramakrishna order. Not only did Sri Ramakrishna go into ecstasy while gazing at a painting of the Madonna and Child, he also had a vision of the luminous, benign form of Christ, who embraced him and entered into him. When Sri Ramakrishna met two of his young disciples, who later became Swami Saradananda, the author of Sri Ramakrishna the Great Master, and Swami Ramakrishnananda, he recognized them immediately as followers of Christ and told them that they had been his disciples in a previous birth. 6 months after Sri Ramakrishna passed away, Swamiji and his brother disciples gathered in the village birthplace of Swami Premananda. One evening, and Swamiji began to speak eloquently about Christ, his renunciation, his great sacrifice, his love and service of humanity. He urged that they should all follow Christ, imitating his divine life. Inspired by Swamiji's words, the young men took monastic vows that night, forming the beginnings of the Ramakrishna order. Later, they found out it had been Christmas Eve. Swamiji had the highest regard for the imitation of Christ. The second reason for focusing on the first chapter of the following is that Swamiji himself translated selections of the first 6 chapters of Book 1 of the Following of Christ into Bengali for a Bengali monthly entitled Isha Anusharana. And Isha in Bengali means Christ, and Anusharana means to follow. Along with his translation, he included quotations of parallel passages of Hindu scriptures. Now, a preface to the Imitation of Christ has already been published in the Complete Works of Swamiji in Volume 8. And in 1997, when Volume 9 came out, the complete footnotes that Swamiji had made for these selections of the Imitation had been published in Volume 9. They also give the parallel scriptural passages and some comments and commentary of Swamiji. I have always found it personally fascinating that during the critical period of Swamiji's life as a wandering monk in India, the only two books that he carried with him were the Bhagavad Gita and the Imitation of Christ. In his preface to the Imitation, Swamiji wrote, "All wise men think alike. The reader, while reading this book, will hear the echo of the Bhagavad Gita over and over again. Like the Bhagavad Gita, it says, 'Give up all dharmas and follow me.'" By imitating Christ, by following his teachings, we can become Christ-like, by assimilating some of his characteristics, such as his purity and dispassion and unselfishness. Such are the lives of our other spiritual teachers as well. They've all said that they know the way and that we should follow them. When Swamiji asked Sri Ramakrishna if he had seen God, his reply was, "Yes, I see him more clearly, more intensely than I see you. One can see him and talk to him just as I am seeing and talking to you. You too can have that experience." The ancient Rishi in the Svetasvatara Upanishad declared, "Hear, ye children of immortal bliss, I have seen that great being who shines effulgent like the sun beyond all darkness. One passes beyond death only by realizing him. Nanya panta vidyate ayanaya. There's no other way. By following the path I have tread, you too can see him." These incarnations, mystics and saints, are so human, yet transcendentally divine. This seamless blending of the two, human and divine, makes it possible for us to relate to them, and through them, to the divine. Now, the experience and teachings of holy people, they're indispensable in guiding us along the path. Having seen the truth, they speak simply and directly, infusing tremendous strength and assurance into their words. We can read abstract descriptions about our spiritual goal in philosophy books and even our scriptures, and of course we do derive a certain understanding. But studying the lives of illumined souls, which are concrete demonstrations of the subtle realities, bring us a different, more comprehensive meaning. Their lives bear out the texts, because they are the embodiments of the principles contained in the scriptures. Swami Ramakrishnananda, the Swami that I referred to as being formerly a disciple of Christ, was one of Sri Ramakrishna's very scholarly disciples. Now, he openly admitted that when he and his brother disciples came to Sri Ramakrishna, that prior to that they could not understand the higher concepts of truth at all until they had come directly in contact with Sri Ramakrishna. And he had a brilliant mind. The living touch of the soul, coming from the spiritual masters, is what makes a deep, lasting impression on our minds, which is essential for our practical spiritual lives. Another monastic disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Shivananda, once asked a monk, "What kind of scriptures are you reading? Can you read our lives? Our lives are the Upanishads. You will find within our lives the essence of the scriptures." When I read this, I was reminded of Sri Ramakrishna's statement that the scriptures contain both sand and sugar, and that we should discard the sand and keep the sugar. And I think the lives of these great ones show us greatly that what they really contain is pure sugar. In trying to understand the profound abstract truths taught in Vedanta philosophy, especially in Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta, there is much to learn from the personal examples and instructions of our teachers, because each one of them, their personalities, their temperaments are so different. So naturally, there are various aspects and nuances of spiritual life and experience are manifest in their lives. This broadens our exposure and facilitates our ability to respond according to our moods and needs. During a discussion at Thousand Island Park, a woman told Swamiji that she just couldn't accept what he was saying, and he replied, "Well, then it's not for you." Whereas when another person commented that what he said struck her as true, he replied, "Well, then it's for you." This variety of interpretations of instructions and how it's presented allows us tremendous freedom to choose and to grow according to our own nature. Perhaps we read about a particular incident in one of these great ones' lives that reflects a similar situation or difficulty that we're going through, and we see how they resolved the problem. Or by reading some teaching, we're able to let go of some small botherations, to distance ourselves from things, persons, or circumstances. We see the bigger picture, and we can refocus our attention on our ideal. Or we feel uplifted by their accounts and their experiences, which helps inspire and strengthen our own efforts. In some way or the other, enlightened souls provide us with a transparent window into the world of the spirit. One of our Western Swamis wrote a book, 6 Lighted Windows, in which he gives his reminiscences of 6 senior Swamis of the Ramakrishna order that he had the privilege of associating with. I think it's a perfect analogy. The following of Christ has been described in a similar way as a clear window of flawless crystal through which shines the light, the unadorned truth. Without the example of such people, these lighted windows, we can't really understand the subtle, true meaning of things spoken of in mystical religion. No matter how much we read, how philosophical or clever we may be, or how eloquently we may speak or write. After all, words are just the outer husk. It's what we are that matters. The following of Christ says, if you know the whole Bible by heart and all the sayings of all the philosophers, what good would it all be without God's grace and love? Groot remarked, I would rather feel compunction than know how to define it. Lofty words, he continues, do not make a person holy and just, but a virtuous life makes one dear to God. As Christ said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Okay, so the question may be phrased variously. What is real for us? What is the content of our experience, of our daily lives? Where is our center of consciousness? Following the great ones puts this issue front and center where it should be. Religion is neither talk, nor theory, nor intellectual consent. It is realization that I am the infinite spirit. So from our ordinary, unenlightened experience, we have no other way of relating to the spiritual dimension or to even know of its existence. Because, as mentioned earlier, that experience is beyond our ordinary sense perception or cognition. It requires a different kind of knowing, intuitive, direct perception, a timeless thinking, if you will, that actually bypasses the mind, as opposed to thinking within the realm of time and causality as we are accustomed to doing. Brahman is a living, conscious light. The Ishu Upanishad gives the description of shukram, which means bright, self-effulgent. This experience of infinite light is a superconscious perception which leaves words and ideas and ordinary thinking which limit everything it touches far, far behind. Swami Prameeshananda, one of the Holy Mother's disciples, expressed this mystical state poetically in one of his hymns to Sri Ramakrishna. On the other side of mind, there is a realm where neither sun nor moon can enter. On the other side. As the Mundaka and the Katha Upanishads say, there the sun shines not, nor the moon, nor the stars, nor these lightnings, not to speak of fire. He shining, everything shines after him. By his light, everything is lighted. Hearing their words, observing their character, how they live, or through the study of their lives of these great ones, especially through their intimate conversations, their letters, their reminiscences, and their teachings, it provides us with a map, like nothing else possibly can, of this uncharted territory, a landscape without familiar reference points for us. We are then able to intuit some idea, to get some sense about it, and thereby gain inspiration to try to attain that state ourselves. After all, it's our own true self. The kingdom of heaven is within us. But we need that touch of the soul to kindle the fire in our hearts to turn within. The second book of the Imitation is devoted to just this, calling us to the inner life. It's just as when we go online to research a particular subject, we find various links to that subject. All of these various spiritual masters serve as links to that one infinite truth, our own self, the Atman. When we observe or read about our teachers, we long to be like them, free, pure, strong, fearless. But are we prepared to do this? The following mentions, all men desire peace, but very few desire those things that make for peace. When the subject of how to attain divine love came up, Swami Premananda said, "Are you ready to pay the price for divine love? The price is your head." To follow them means to attempt to live as they did, not in the particulars, of course, but in principle. In order to do this, we need some idea, some insight into why they did what they did. In our spiritual life, our teachers caution us not to just accept what we read or hear. We should think deeply about it. Shravana, we should hear. Manana, we should reflect. And nididhyasana, we should meditate on it. And I would like to add karma, act. We need to implement the results of our reflections and meditations into our lives. What are the implications of a course of action? What's the thought behind it? In other words, we need to open our hearts and minds to our spiritual masters' influence, incorporate their teachings and advice into our lives if we want to live like them. In the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna had a similar question in mind when he asked Sri Krishna about the characteristics of a person of steady wisdom. He asked Sri Krishna, how does this person move about in the world? How does he sit? How does he talk? He wants to know, what are these characteristics? We have to observe these things in another person in order to imitate them. When we study the lives of the great ones, we get a sense of their inner life as it is reflected in their interactions with others and their responses to varying circumstances, what they say. Swami Turiyananda said, what is truth, an accomplished fact for a person of realization, is a practice for us. Arjuna wants to know, what are the characteristics that make a person steady in wisdom? And then how is he or she perceived by others? And how does that knowledge manifest once the person is enlightened? How does it manifest in daily life? Now, in a very few sentences, Sri Krishna basically wraps it up by telling him when a person casts off all desires from the mind and he's established in his self alone, that person is one of steady wisdom. The 18 verses of the second chapter of the Gita, beginning with the two just mentioned, elucidate the qualities of a wise person and truly describe how our teachers live their lives. True women and men of steady wisdom, established in their own self, masters of self-restraint, with purified hearts and complete knowledge. Nothing can ruffle their inner calm. They are jnanis with this infinite knowledge, And yet there's another factor, is transparently manifest in their lives and actions. Universal unconditioned love, and how that tremendous unselfish love flowed to all. I mentioned Sri Sarada Devi, the Holy Mother, in the beginning. Let us take her as one example. For those of you who are familiar with the Holy Mother's life, we can't find a better model to follow than the Holy Mother. Her experiences with others spanned the entire spectrum of human emotions and relationships. She didn't live in retirement, away from the world, but was in the middle of fire all the time. And living as she did, she ever and always spurned all selfish concerns. Her life is one of the clearest examples of deep meditation coupled with active compassion. She was soft and loving, yet was the embodiment of tremendous strength amidst an extremely trying domestic environment. The atmosphere was often tense and hostile in spite of her soothing presence. She would calmly say, "It isn't true that we won't face difficulties. They always come, but they do not last forever. They pass away like water under a bridge." Well, this is the relative world, after all, where everything is based on the principle of action and reaction. Sometimes things go well, and sometimes things go terribly wrong. But the ups and downs are momentary, Mother says. Further, she encouraged everyone to honor, as she did, the divine within everyone by separating a person's behavior from the real person who is divine. The following of Christ says, "Vanity of vanities, and all is vanity, except to love God and serve Him only. This is the highest wisdom, to see the world as it truly is, fleeting, to love the world not for its own sake, but for God's." The contrast of Mother's calm, enduring, forgiving nature amidst the trials and hardships of life amply bears out this saying of the following, making her all the more appealing as a role model. Finally, I would like to mention 3 things that I feel are important for us in our attempt to follow the great ones. We need CPR, not only to jumpstart, but to sustain our journey. I hope we don't need ordinary CPR. You might after 40 minutes. The CPR that I'm referring to is commitment, patience, and renunciation. First is commitment. Commitment is derived from the Latin word which means to join, to connect, to entrust, to pledge. We have to commit ourselves. We have to mean it, really mean it, and give our lives to it. When we truly commit ourselves to something, anything, we close the loopholes. The mind's scattered, restless nature makes it so easy to let fly innumerable excuses to slack off, to get derailed, distracted, and to self-righteously rationalize everything else. But commitment puts us in a lockdown mode. I'm going to do this even if I fail 100 times and fall down. I'm going to get up and keep going. That's commitment, giving your whole heart to the endeavor with absolutely no alternative of turning back. When we commit ourselves to follow our spiritual teachers, it presupposes conviction. We have to be convinced about what we are doing, that following them is beneficial for us, that it is right and true for us. As I mentioned, our spiritual teachers emphasize establishing convictions by correct thinking. Otherwise, what's the basis for our practice? It can't be based merely on intellectual information or some sentiment or emotion. It has to run deeper than that, or it won't take root. It simply won't last. So they say we have to develop, refine, purify our intellect. The benefit of doing that is that not only intellectually, but at a deeper level, we have a firm grasp of the philosophical principles underlying our beliefs. We should be convinced about the efficacy of the teachings we are following and their relevance to our lives. In a lecture entitled 4 Pillars of Wisdom, one of our late senior swamis listed these pillars as right conduct, character, intellectual understanding or conviction, and meditation and other spiritual practices. The third pillar of wisdom, conviction, this is what the Swami says about it. He says, our understanding deepens when we study the lives of those who have attained to that blessed state called God realization, who have demonstrated these teachings in their lives. In other words, when our understanding deepens, our conviction grows. And then we feel, yes, this is the right thing. This is the best possible way I can live my life. Through conviction, our efforts are strengthened, which in turn reinforce our conviction. Otherwise, without right understanding and conviction, as soon as an obstacle pops up, we're shaken. We're overcome with doubt and misgivings, and we're ready to give up like Arjuna on the battlefield. We just collapse. Oh, it's too hard. I can't possibly do this. I'm probably not ready for it. There's no way I can follow through on this. One encounter with one of Holy Mother's eccentric, mentally unbalanced relatives, and we'd be pulling our hair out, or worse, we'd be pulling theirs out. Not only do we all have such people in our lives in some way or the other, but the inconvenient truth is that we have a touch of them within ourselves. This takes courage to accept and strength to transcend. So we have to be fully engaged, totally committed to following a great light such as Mother or Christ. The second thing that is important in following them is patience. We live during times of mind-warping speed, instant messaging, smartphones, high-speed internet, bullet trains, if it comes about. They can take us from LA to San Francisco in 2 hours and 40 minutes. Faster, faster, faster. That seems to be the theme underlying our lives. We don't know where we're going in such a hurry, but you can be sure that we're going to get there in record time. We live in a perpetual state of fast forward. The basic nature of the mind of the whole world is turbulence, this dizzying, constant change. Nothing stands still for a moment. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Sha, Sha, Sha. Forbear, forbear, forbear. Spiritual forbearance or patience is that stabilizing force that enables us to withstand the irritations, the contradictions, the cross-currents of life, as well as just the interminable waiting that spiritual life requires. Patience is the capacity of calm endurance, remaining undisturbed, unagitated, composed and quiet within while the storm rages and surges around us. We have to persevere, and as Swami Turiyananda would say, practice being one of steady wisdom by remaining firm in the face of life's challenges. The other aspect of patience is that we have to be patient with ourselves. Most of the time we become impatient with others because we are not patient with ourselves. Spiritual life is for the bold. Making changes in our lives and personality takes tremendous courage, and it takes time. It's not a quick fix. To transform our consciousness, to rise above the obsession with body and mind, and attempt to live in a higher plane of spiritual awareness requires tremendous effort and patience. Because it's the nature of spiritual life that there will be ups and downs, progress and regress, hope and despair, joy and stagnation. It's all part of the game. But when we are patient, we are not in such a big hurry to reform everyone around us, but we are willing to slow down and focus within. As Swami Turiyananda wrote in one of his letters, the main thing is to adhere to the ideal with patience. If you can do that, gradually everything will become favorable. Success is inevitable for one who continues with patience. So much importance does he give to this virtue. Third and final aspect of CPR is renunciation, self-sacrifice. Initially, renunciation is painful because our tender egos are thwarted. And if it's one thing an ego rejects outright, it's being thwarted or ignored. Living like the great ones requires tremendous sacrifice. Christ tells us, Give up all you have and follow me. Whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever shall lose his life for my sake shall find it. When we renounce, we give up, we forfeit something, be it an idea, an object, our opinions, an opportunity, a relationship, maybe a position or a career opportunity, some recognition, reputation, whatever, for the sake of something considered to have a greater value or claim. The most precious thing we can sacrifice is our small self, which is so dear to us at present. But to follow the great ones, we have to let go of self. Whosoever shall lose his life for my sake shall find it. Such a person alone lives who lives for others. Swamiji mentions in Christ the Messenger, to be unselfish, perfectly selfless, is salvation itself. For the man within dies, and God alone remains. The bottom line in following them is being centered in the divine within and loving and serving others as the divine without thought of self, and that requires sacrifice. I feel commitment, patience, and renunciation will take us a long way in trying to follow our spiritual masters. The way may be sharp as the edge of a razor and difficult to cross, but through their grace and influence, the impossible becomes possible. Let us join Swami Vivekananda in offering our salutations to all past prophets whose teachings and lives we have inherited, to all godlike men and women presently working to help humanity, and to all those coming in the future, living gods, to work unselfishly for others.